Good morning. It's Thursday, August 14th, 2014. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. We're still in our special broadcast this morning. It's the 38th day of Operation Protective Edge. The 72-hour truce ended last night at midnight. Both Israel and Hamas, although, have agreed to a further 5 days of ceasefire. This was agreed upon after a short burst of renewed fighting occurred. Rocket fire into Israel led to IDF airstrikes. As of this morning, however, a shaky truce does appear to still be holding. With me in studio now is I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shlev. Good morning, Tal.
Good morning, Gail.
Everyone also in the Israeli public and also within the Israeli government was waiting for last night at midnight to understand exactly what would be the next step. But even before then, rocket fire was fired into Israel, and Netanyahu did order airstrikes back into Gaza.
I think it was one of the messiest evenings we've had up until now. It's always like that when you reach the garbage time or the party time of the last time of the last hours of extending a ceasefire. But yesterday was definitely a mess. There was a lot of miscommunications throughout the whole day and a lot of misinformation running around. We had Palestinian officials saying that they're almost on the verge of a long-term agreement, and then we had Israeli officials saying we're very far away, the gaps are still wide. At around 9:30-10, it seemed that there was a crisis because the rocket fire did resume from Gaza, but Hamas didn't deny it has any responsibility for this rocket fire. And at about 10:30, the Palestinian delegation and the Egyptian leadership did announce that the ceasefire was extended for another 5 days. This is aimed basically and mainly to give time for both delegations to negotiate their positions for the long-term agreement, which we're still very far away. But the Israeli government was took its time, we might say, and was waiting to see what exactly will happen with the ceasefire. It did accept the extension of the ceasefire for another 5 days, but they didn't announce it. And as you said, at around 12 o'clock, the IDF did start to retaliate in Gaza. The airstrikes continued until about 4 o'clock in the morning, and Israeli officials stressed that this is a retaliation for the rocket fire that was even before the extension of the ceasefire, and that if Hamas doesn't respond to the airstrikes yesterday, then the ceasefire will be extended for another 5 days. Right. So basically, we have until Monday at 12 o'clock for the sides to continue negotiations. The Israeli delegation is back in Israel, consulting with the Israeli Prime Minister and the Defense Minister. The Palestinian delegation split up. The Hamas part flew to Doha to have consultations in Qatar with the Hamas leadership, and the PLO, the Fatah part, the PA part, went back to Ramallah and is now consulting with the Palestinian Authority leadership.
And you bring up a good point. The Israeli Cairo delegation went back and calculated its how its developments in Cairo with the Prime Minister and Defense Minister. And this part and also the 5-day truce is bringing a lot of criticism from other ministers and other policymakers in Israel. Is Israel now playing Hamas's game by continuing to renew these talks and renew these truces without any real, something to hold on to?
Netanyahu's internal problems have been increasing in the past few days. The fact that he has not convened the Security Cabinet for more than 8 days to discuss Israel's negotiation policies is giving him a lot of problems. The Security Cabinet ministers are very unhappy. They are learning about developments from the press. When you call up Security Cabinet ministers, you ask them what's going on, they say, I have no idea. And this is a kind of an absurd situation. And two, the Israeli public, there's a situation in which yesterday the whole Israeli public is waiting till 12 o'clock, waiting for Hamas to announce if they're extending the negotiations. This definitely undermines the Israeli sense of secureness and security, and also controlling the situation. And I think Netanyahu is going to have to deal with this very closely, but he also has other issues to deal with, as you brought to my attention.
So these other issues, of course, internal issues are one side, but there's also external issues. We've been covering this very, very closely, not only with Operation Protective Edge, we're also talking about the 9-month framework deal that Kerry failed to implement. We're talking about the Wall Street Journal this morning coming out with a new report about the personal relationship between Obama and Netanyahu and the diplomatic relationship between the United States and Israel.
Well, I think it's this time the Wall Street Journal is even a bit broader than the personal relationship between Netanyahu and Obama. I think that one is totally ruined. But yesterday, the White House releases a statement regarding a phone call between Netanyahu and Obama. It's a very brief statement just saying that they discussed the Egyptian ceasefire initiative and that Obama reiterated the U.S. support for the Egyptian initiative and also stress the need to reach a solution that will secure Israel's security, but also take care of the Gaza humanitarian needs. And according to the Wall Street Journal, that was a very combative phone call. And a piece that is published today in the Wall Street Journal, I don't remember anything so bad. It talks about the sway in the relationship between Israel and Washington. It's much, according to this piece, it's much worse than what we thought to begin with. Their lowest point is something, I don't know how much lower the relationship can get, because each time we talk about the lowest point in the relationship, but there is a feeling in the U.S. Someone is definitely trying to fuel up this conflict between the Obama administration and Netanyahu government, and it seems like there is a feeling amongst the administration that Netanyahu pushed aside the administration officials, not in a very polite way, and that the Gaza conflict, according to the administration officials quoted in the piece, persuaded them that Netanyahu and his national security team are, I'm quoting, both reckless and unworthy. There's the words like manipulating. Right. I do not remember such a harsh rhetoric coming out of the White House. This, of course, is after they have been getting quite a lot from the Israeli side, quite a lot of criticism in the past month and in the past year. But it definitely seems that there's a big problem between Israel and the U.S. And if people are trying to brush it away, it's not succeeding. They're not succeeding. And we are hearing this also. The Wall Street Journal piece today does explain some of the expressions and statements we've been hearing in the past few days from Israeli politicians. We heard Justice Minister Tzipi Livni, Finance Minister Yair Lapid, leader of the opposition Yitzhak Bougie Herzog, all attacking Netanyahu specifically for ruining and undermining the relationship with the United States. And we can assume that the administration has been conducting discussions with all of these people, with Netanyahu's counterparts and surroundings, people they think they can have a better communication with. But this just goes to show there is not a lot of communication going on between the administration itself and Netanyahu's government or Netanyahu's close circle, and if it is, it's very bad. I'm
just going to reiterate one of the quotes in the article. One of the administration officials say the United States is their strongest friend, talking about, of course, Israel. The notion that they are playing the United States, or that they're manipulating us publicly completely miscalculates their place in the world. This is, of course, the strongest rhetoric I think we've heard in the last period of time. But what was interesting is that throughout the operation, we did know of a lot of phone calls that were cut off and so forth. Don't never second guess me. We can talk about the rhetoric of this relationship. But when Iron Dome was passed, when the U.S. President Obama did sign for another $225 million for Iron Dome, it wasn't very much well received here in Israel. Yes, people were thankful, but maybe Netanyahu there could have been more thankful and saved this relationship.
I think that there's a big problem. Netanyahu is stating publicly stating one thing and then behind the scenes working differently, or at least people on behalf of him are working differently. According to this piece, the administration is especially angry because of Netanyahu manipulating through Congress, and this has been a long-going problem between the administration and Netanyahu's government, and Netanyahu specifically has very good connections with Congress, and it seems like Netanyahu has given up on the relationship with the administration because he has a good relationship with the Congress and he can get whatever he wants through Congress. But the fact is that, yes, Netanyahu has, on the outside, is very appreciative of the United States. Just a week ago, he said the United States has been terrific, and a lot of superlatives.
We can also talk about what terrific means, right?
Exactly. So it makes you wonder, if this is terrific, then I think we need to redefine all our definitions, because this is definitely not terrific. Of course, this is a report in the Wall Street Journal. It could be fueled by people who want to hurt and damage the relationship. We have seen this in the past, but definitely this is an outstanding piece that we've never seen rhetoric like this before.
We're going to take a quick break to speak now to Yoav Borovich, our I-24 news correspondent. Yoav, you are on the Israeli-Gaza border this morning. A shaky truce is still in place, but it wasn't a quiet night.
Wasn't a quiet night at all. After 3 days of quiet, 5 rockets at least landing here in open areas. and the Sha'ar HaNegev Regional Council, also in the Chof Ashkelon Regional Council. In response, the Israeli Air Force is hitting 4 terror targets in the Gaza Strip, in Zaytun and Beituna. So basically here, you also talk to the people. They're planning a demonstration tonight in Tel Aviv because they're saying, another ceasefire is just, they don't even get clear direction, whether they can go back home or they can't go back home, because we all remember what happened last week when they heard that they could get back home, and then they were hit after the first ceasefire by more than 100 rockets during the weekend. This is why they're having the demonstration tonight in Tel Aviv, also during the week. People from the army, also Sami Turgeman, Yitzhak Aharonovich, the Internal Security Minister, heard some really hard words from the people here in the Gaza envelope communities. But so far, since midnight, we can say that there was quiet here, now expecting 5 days of ceasefire. But we know those ceasefires can break in any given moment, and we know that also the IDF got its troops closer to the border. We can see more troops here than in the beginning of the week. So, as you said, nobody really knows what's going to happen, and we're going to be here following all developments.
And Yoav, of course, the Homefront Command did let residents of the Gaza Strip communities return to their houses yesterday at midnight. Is there any new restrictions now because of last night's exchange of fire that you know of from the Homefront Command?
No, there are no new restrictions. As I said before, they're very weary about, giving, very clear, any instructions because of what happened. So we know that part of the people came back, but still most of them, at least 50% of the people here in the Gaza envelope communities are not back at their homes. So really, you go around here and it's quite empty and it's quite tense.
Yoav Borovich, our I-24 news correspondent there on the Israeli-Gaza border. Thank you for joining us, and of course we will be getting updates from you throughout the day. With me also in studio is Yossi Melman, the intelligence and security expert. Good morning, Yossi.
Good morning.
So we started off by saying that, as Yoav said as well, it wasn't a quiet night. It was a night that did have a short burst of exchange of fire. Your assessment for now, for the next 5 days, is that it will stay quiet because Hamas didn't take responsibility for those rockets.
Yes, my assessment is it will stay. What happened last night was just a chicken game. Psychological warfare all day, not only in the evening. Mm-hmm. Both sides wanted to manipulate the other side's public opinion and decision makers. Eventually, the ceasefire was agreed. And before it was agreed at 9:30, between 9:30 and 1 a.m., someone from Gaza launched 8 rockets. Israel hesitated for a while. The Israeli decision makers, Prime Minister and Defense Minister, were a bit confused, didn't know how to respond to the ceasefire. That's why they kept silent. And they decided eventually to retaliate, but it was a symbolic minor retaliation with the Israeli Air Force. And since 1 a.m., there is a quiet and calm in the south, so the ceasefire so far is holding. The Israel position is that Israel does not accept this kind of a game that Hamas is saying it's not us, it's one of these small renegade organizations, because we saw already, at least once, there was a very clear-cut example that when Hamas want the ceasefire to hold, then they are making it sure they are maintaining everything in their position and enforcing their will on these small groups.
But you mentioned a game, and some politicians here in Israel and public officials will say, well, Israel's playing the same kind of game because we're waiting for Hamas's okay to go for another truce. We're waiting for Hamas to fire, and then we'll retaliate, meaning there's always going to be this almost war of attrition starting.
Well, the frustration in Israel among cabinet ministers is understood, because they are like dolls on a string. Right. They don't know what's going on. I mean, the prime minister and the defense minister are calling the shots, informing them or briefing them only post factum, and therefore they are frustrated. So what they do, they They express their frustration in the media by making inflammatory rhetorics. We saw yesterday not only Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, we are used to his words, but also Naftali Bennett and even Finance Minister Yair Lapid suddenly played such a machoistic game. So it is understood. But the real question is what Israel can do. And the alternative is worse than the current situation, because the alternative is to move in, and I don't think neither the public nor the military want to see more of the same. So the next time Israel would enter Gaza, it would be on a much larger scale, probably strategically, militarily speaking. Israel would cut off, split the small strip of Gaza into 3 or 4 enclaves, would reach the Mediterranean, and then what? What would be the next stage? To topple the Hamas government or to stay there? And this is the dilemma, and therefore Israel is in a position only to respond.
But one of the problems is that when you have, so I agree with what you say, but one of the problems is that when you have a dilemma and you need to consult with as many people as you can. Netanyahu is not consulting with the proper decision-making forum for more than 8 days. There is a big dilemma, a big situation, a big strategic question where to go from here. And the problem is, I think in the meanwhile, is that he's annoying the cabinet ministers, but they're also sensing him weak. They're sensing his weakness, and they're going, and all of these inflammatory statements in the public just erode his weakness even more, erode his position even more. And eventually, Netanyahu started this operation with very high approval ratings, and they've been on a steady decline in the past. I think there haven't been polled this week, but at least when you feel the public trend, there's a steady decline because people see that Netanyahu is not speaking. He didn't give a statement specifically on the ceasefire efforts in the past few days. The public doesn't know what's going on, and there is an absurd situation that the whole Israeli public is watching TV yesterday and waiting to hear from the Palestinian delegation what exactly is going on. It's true that there's a dilemma. It needs to take time. There's no room for any very quick decisions, but there's also it seems like he's disconnected himself from the whole surroundings around him, and he's losing points.
And it's not only the Israeli public that doesn't know what's going on. It's, as you said, it's cabinet ministers themselves that simply do not have anything to say, but to the media, to their constituents, and to their parties.
Well, yes, but on the other hand, it plays into the hands of Hamas. It is weakening the Israeli position, or seemingly weakening the Israeli position. And maybe what we saw last night was an example of this, of the sense by Hamas that Israeli public opinion and the cabinet ministers are in opposition or not supporting enough the prime minister, and therefore they can create a wedge between the public and the prime minister and the defense minister. In that sense, there is nothing that can be done about it. Israel is a democracy. So that's the game, you played it with in a democracy. I agree with Tal that maybe a better crisis management by the prime minister, at least to please his cabinet ministers, would have been better. But on the other hand, one can understand why the prime minister is behaving this way. From day one, there were cabinet ministers who opposed his moves, but not in the cabinet. They were saying, preaching with one voice in the cabinet. Basically, it was a consensus, and they agree with the prime minister and his policy.
And then holding press conferences.
It's unprecedented that cabinet ministers who are holding responsibility, sharing the same responsibility as the prime minister to all decisions, whether they agree or not, are going and stabbing in the back.
Despite us, yeah.
But he's not even. There are some cabinet ministers that have been loyal to him, and even them, they're not. He's not bringing them into the circle of decision making. Mm-hmm. And also, there's this the question of the leaks from the cabinet. I'm not sure that Netanyahu himself is so immune from that accusation. Last week, there was a leak on Channel 2 of the IDF presentation of how catastrophic and a ground invasion or a full takeover of Gaza would be. It was a very, very horrific outcome and presentation, very scary. The assumption is, I don't want to go into it, but one of the assumptions was that this was part of Netanyahu's battle against his contenders from the right, trying to prove, look, this is why I'm not launching a full takeover of Gaza, because it will have horrific results and horrific outcomes. And Netanyahu himself also is not immune. I'm not sure he's immune. It's not clear that he's the one who leaked this presentation, and I don't think that's the issue. But there is a problem of leaks. He's not. I don't think he's innocent in that
first
too.
First of all, the IDF didn't like that leak because the IDF realized that he was.
They're also a political.
He was brought into the
yeah.
political game. Now, I mean, if throughout this war, everyone was trying to manipulate and exploit the situation for his political gains, and I'm old enough to bear witness to all the Israeli wars since '67, and I've never seen such a military operation which is prolonged, one of the longest in the history of Israel. And the politicians back home are just playing a different game instead of hold your horses. Let's wait for a few more weeks, and then we can come. We'll make our calculations and political dimensions and decisions. But what is more important are the relations with the United States.
And we will go right back on that. We have started, of course, speaking about the Wall Street Journal report from this morning. But one more question about Cairo. Despite the fact that we don't know much about what's happening in Cairo, many of the assessments is that, rationally speaking, or if we can look at game theory, what will come out will be more of the same of what we saw in 2012. Can Netanyahu come back with that? Not politically, but militarily to the Israeli public? Because we also heard the IDF spokesperson
It will be a modification. It will be 2012 plus. What we see is an effort...
Plus concessions perhaps on the Israeli part.
Well, and also on Hamas part. Okay. Concessions, or maybe you can call it enforcement. Conditions.
We're not going to see demilitarization. We're not going to see
well,
these big words.
Demilitarization is taking place. The arsenal has been reduced, and it's
until the next time. This is what the Israeli public will say.
But it's difficult for them to. It will be more difficult for them, much more harder to smuggle weapons, because we see a different Egypt. There is a different regime in Egypt, but I think what we see is a three-tier effort with an attempt to synchronize all the moves. The first tier is the ceasefire, to make the ceasefire in place in order to allow the diplomatic negotiation to go on. But diplomatically, there is an effort, an attempt to reach an agreement on the already agreed upon shared ideas, like opening the crossing borders. In the long run, in the third tier, in the third floor, there will be an extensive effort, I'm not sure it would be successful, to come with a formula, demilitarization or partial demilitarization in exchange for an increase of aid and support for the rehabilitation of Gaza.
We also heard yesterday in Israel, Netanyahu's internal criticism is also going to the legal spectrum now in Israel. There is going to be an internal investigation opened up against the leadership on how it received and made decisions. Is this because of the UN Human Rights Council decision, or do we have some evidence on the ground that you believe can actually indict some of the leadership?
For me, it's a very strange decision by the stand controller. His main mandate is to investigate decision-making processes.
Right.
Not whether the way the Israeli military behaved in Gaza, conducted its war effort, is legal or illegal. I would have preferred, and I think it would have been much better for Israel if the Israeli government, not an outside body or a body like the state controller, who is supposedly neutral or separate a state, would set an inquiry commission, whose making would be international experts, legal Israeli and international legal experts, military experts, and maybe people of stature, intellectuals, and they would start the investigation before all these external international groups are calling up to have an inquiry of their own, especially the UN Human Rights Council.
Tal, will Netanyahu look at this? Everything else internally has been being put pressure. Will this now state control's report perhaps to put more pressure on him?
If I would have to guess, the state controller is very close to Netanyahu. If I would have to guess, he wouldn't initiate this investigation without getting Netanyahu's okay. Israel has been debating how to deal with the UN Human Rights Council investigation or commission inquiry.
So it's a more preemptive step?
And it is a very good step, at least to show outside that, look, we're conducting our own investigation. Right. It's true that maybe it's not the right forum, and it could be a different forum. And I think traditionally, the state controller traditionally there were special appointed inquiry commissions to investigate the Vinograd Committee.
But it has nothing to do with the state controller.
Exactly. Right. So that's why I have this feeling that the state controller was actually quite tipped off by Netanyahu.
But it's not the right place, it's not the right forum, and it's not the right organization. Right. Usually the state controller, I would have expected him, maybe, if he wants to investigate this war, to investigate the decision-making process within the cabinet, or how was the coordination between the military and the political, diplomatic political level, the government. But the legal implications of this war, it's very, very strange.
This state controller is not considered a very biting one. I think he has not yet proved himself to be like his predecessor that was very active. Right. So I don't think... Hyperactive. I don't think this is actually a threat to Netanyahu. I think he's much more scared and threatened by what will happen in his coalition after.
And perhaps also internationally, as we spoke about from the beginning. Thank you for both for being here. We're going to be going to I-24 News Desk for some headlines. After that, we'll be here with the member of Knesset, Stav Shaffir of the Labour Party. She, of course, is central on the Finance Committee, and we'll be hearing about Israel's economic concerns after Operation Protective Edge, and, of course, her position on the opposition as well. We'll be right back. Good morning. It's still Thursday, August 14th. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. We're still in our special broadcast this morning. It's the 38th day of Operation Protective Edge. The 72-hour truce ended last night at midnight. Both Israel and Hamas have agreed to a further 5 days of ceasefire. This was agreed upon after a short burst of renewed fighting occurred overnight. Rocket fire into Israel led to IDF airstrikes. As of this morning, however, a shaky truce appears to still be holding. With me now in studio is the Israeli parliament member from the Labour Party and on the Knesset's Finance Committee, member of Knesset Stav Shaffir. Member of Knesset Shaffir, thank you for joining us this morning. Good morning. And still with us is I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. Tal, just to recap what we've been speaking about this morning, the Wall Street Journal does come out with almost slamming report on Netanyahu's part, calling the conversation that he had yesterday with Obama combative, and saying that Israel, and quoting an administration official there, is miscalculating its place in the world. This is external pressure on Netanyahu, but there's also a bit of internal pressure, mostly from the right.
Well, Netanyahu is definitely not having the best morning. I think in his own home newspaper, Wall Street Journal, that is affiliated with him many times and usually is supportive of him, this piece is published, and it does use unprecedented language against Netanyahu from U.S. administration officials, saying that Netanyahu did push the administration aside, but still wants the security assurances on the long-term Gaza ceasefire. And they say that the administration officials are quoted saying that the Gaza conflict persuaded them that Netanyahu is both reckless and unworthy. And yes, he is under attack from the U.S. and also from inside his own coalition. And in the past few days, we're hearing more and more criticism of Netanyahu's conduct of this operation. In the beginning, the opposition, most of Netanyahu's political challenge at this moment is in his own coalition. People were trying to challenge him or bypass him from the right, but the opposition, it seems, is awakening in the past few days and might be voicing much more vocal objections to his policy, specifically on this issue of the United States, the relationship with the United States, and any long-term political plan that Netanyahu at the moment has not yet presented to the public.
I want to direct this question then to you, Member of Knesset Shaffir. Throughout the operation, also public opinion polls showed that 87% at one point the public was behind the operation. And also the opposition was a very quiet opposition throughout the operation. And even when we did hear some voices of criticism, they were lone voices of criticism. You didn't see Labour member of Knesset going out to Rabin Square and calling for a peace or a ceasefire right away.
As the opposition, and in the opposition is not not one single party, and there are very different opinions. That's why it's the opposition and not the coalition. In the Labour Party, our opinion and our stand around this operation was constant from the very beginning. On the one hand, the first priority is to protect the lives and the security of Israeli citizens in the southern villages and in the whole of Israel. On the other hand, we have to ask ourselves what brought us to this operation. Another operation. Every year, almost, that we see in the last 5 years, that we see another operation. Right. And every time, and my criticism on Netanyahu on that point was the same criticism from the very beginning. It doesn't seem that Netanyahu has a real strategy, a real security strategy, a real political strategy. In 2009, Netanyahu declared on every television channel that the Hamas should be destroyed. We all believe that terror organizations should be destroyed. But what happened since 2009 until today? Hamas is only shooting its rockets farther and farther into Israeli territory. So we see that strategy is lacking.
But wouldn't you say then that it's the job of the opposition to actually, not let Netanyahu go on with another, as you said, you quoted yourself, saying there's an operation every few years. So isn't this a time for the opposition to say, maybe the operations aren't working, we need a long-term plan? Maybe it needs to be a political plan and not a military plan.
Of course, the long-term plan is a political plan. However, when you know that you have rockets shooting at Israeli citizens and tunnels underneath their houses, threatening their lives, you can't not react. This is impossible. I travel in the south all the time, and the reaction that I get from citizens, their fears, the trauma that they're experiencing after 14 years of that, is something that you just can't ignore. However, of course, the long-term political plan must be around diplomacy. It's obvious, and everybody knows that today, that if we won't go directly and urgently into a two-state solution, it's actually not really a two-state solution, but a four-state solution with Jordan and Egypt as part of this partnership around the long-term agreement. Of course, using the help and the support of the Arab League initiative that's been constantly reapproving its agreement for a 67, an agreement based on a 67 borders and territorial swap. This is obviously what we have to go into.
But do you believe that Netanyahu can do it? I mean, if you go before the operation, we had 9 months
It's not
framework.
about can, it's about want. Netanyahu doesn't want to do it. Netanyahu declares that he is pro the two-state solution. He's been declaring that for many years now. But his entire party almost is very much to the right of him, and as they're going to more and more to the extreme right, it's helping him to stand in something that looks a little bit moderate, because as they go farther to the right, he appears to be more moderate. However, his only plan seems to be to maintain the status quo, and this status quo is impossible for Israelis. It's a status quo of terror, it's a status quo of war, it's a status quo that will not give us security for the long term.
And therefore, do you believe that the opposition may become more vocal because the status quo is looking right now maybe as a war of attrition? If every time we go into these truces and we renew them and rocket fire does continue, there is no political plan on the table as far as we know, is the opposition going to become more vocal and less silent as it has been in the past 38 days?
We have to be the most responsible that we can, and it's not like we're working against a clear air. We're working with a terror organization to try and find a solution and try to find agreement. I think that we have to collaborate only with the moderate voices on the other side. I think that we had to, and I feel sorry to talk about the past, but I thought that the opportunity that we had in the previous year for negotiation could get us to a much better position right now. It could get Mahmoud Abbas to a much stronger position right now. It could reach a serious agreement with the help of the United States and European countries. We have to try again. It didn't work because it seems that there was not enough will for that to work. A real negotiation, by the way, means a serious steps for negotiation. For example, Netanyahu, when he started the negotiation, instead of releasing terrorists with blood on their hands, he could go with the first demand that the Americans had and free settlement building.
Right.
He chose to release prisoners and not free settlements, which shows on the real intentions behind that. The right wing in Israel is not thinking on the future of the young generation.
Not only that, is the political climate in Israel within public opinion ready to now speak about a political solution with the Palestinians? We're talking about people cannot even express, not people in government, artists and so forth, cannot really express their opinions without having this huge backlash, not only in social media, but threatening their lives.
In every survey where you check and you ask Israelis what they really want, 70% are still pro-solution, two-state solution. I don't think that as leaders we need to think all the time, will people agree with us? We have to think people chose us to sit in our positions, and what the Prime Minister has to think is what is the best thing for Israel, and then he has to go forward to the public and tell people, I believe the right thing for us to do is a two-state solution right now, and yes, it's gonna hurt, it's not going to be easy, because it's never easy after such an ongoing and such a long conflict where people are traumatized. Our generation is traumatized with suicide bombings that we had on buses for more than a decade, and the people in the south are traumatized by the rockets. It's difficult, but it has to go forward and put a strong stand and say we have to be brave, we have to be courageous and finish with this conflict.
But isn't it true that the Israeli public, you of course are emerged after the social protest of summer 2011. Isn't it true that the Israeli public is more concerned about socio-economic issues, but in the end they go to vote for, at least it seems, they go to vote for security and diplomacy issues? And
not only that, I'll add on to that, they also it's reflective in the budget.
In the last elections, we didn't actually see that. We saw 19 mandates for Yair Lapid, who didn't say anything about security. He only asked where's the money. Today is doing exactly the opposite of that, but that's another issue. They gave 15 mandates to the Labour Party that focused on economical issues for our campaign. I think the Israeli public is very much in the middle of that. Yes, of course, when there is a security situation, the one thing that you care about, and that's completely understood, is to live. You just want to survive that. But our social and economical survival is another issue that we're dealing with all the time.
And you're going to deal with it probably much more in the aftermath of the operation. Of course, there's going to be more reports on how much did it actually cost, how much is it going to be an economic toll on the public.
We're actually dealing with it right now. During the operation. It's one of the, and that's something else that shows you that the protest movement had serious influence on the public. I think it's the first time that during an operation, the discourse on the economical damage, what happens to the citizens of the South that were damaged severely economically by the situation, and following the operation, suddenly it's within the conversation from the very first days of the conflict.
And you were ejected from a committee, from the Finance Committee. You're a member of the Finance Committee this week, simply because you asked the member of Knesset, Slomiansky, is he withholding information from the public? Do you still believe that he is?
Of course he is. I think, it was made clear when Slomiansky didn't deny what I asked him. I've been asking the Treasury to move money, urgent money, to the southern villages now, not after the operation, but now, in order to help them survive the operation economically. Every time I asked that, the Treasury told me, not now, there's no money, we have to wait. Suddenly, I'm getting into the Finance Committee a few days ago, and the Treasury is asking us to transfer 20 million shekels to the settlements. And I'm asking them, where is it going in the settlements? And they tell me it's going for social and welfare services. Why is it not going to the southern villages? Isn't it more important right now? Isn't it the most urgent cause right now? And the head of the Finance Committee is not allowing, from the Jewish Home Party, is not allowing the Treasury to give me an answer. And then I'm asking him, is there a political deal around that? Mm-hmm. Is this a political money? Because I've been following the secret budget that Israel has, and we have quite a large budget that is completely secret from the public. It's even secret for many of the Knesset members. And I see how it's really working. The people who are more close to the politicians in the head of the committee, politicians in the Treasury, are getting more money. That's how the settlers got from last October nearly 800 million shekels as a bonus, extra to their basic budget.
But this operation won't change that? Do you not believe that maybe defense minister and so forth that knows what the residents of the Gaza Strip communities went through won't be allocating or pushing to allocate more money towards them and not towards the settlers?
I'm trying to put as much pressure as possible. I think that every Israeli citizen should get the same amount of budget according to their needs. And what I see is that the southern villages, not only during this operation, but throughout the year, are not getting enough. They get less. Their lobby in the political sphere in Knesset is not strong enough. And I'm intending to be their lobbyist inside the Finance Committee. It's very sad that you see this real priorities of the government. That's why the government is hiding its real budget. That's why they have a secret budget. They want to hide from the public their actual priorities.
But this situation also created perhaps maybe a bizarre situation, one will say, of having labor members of Knesset cooperating with the ultra-Orthodox parties, where there's many points of disagreement there, also on budgetary issues.
Of course.
That's how government works?
It's not how government works, but I think in the fight, the struggle that I've been doing in the Finance Committee for the last year is not a fight of opposition against coalition. I would do the same thing from within the coalition. I don't think that it can continue this way, that we will have a secret budget that is completely untransparent. Nobody knows where the money is going to, where it comes from. When there are social cuts, severe social cuts in social services budgets, like this week, they cut 125 million shekels from public transportation with no explanation. And it all goes secretly through the Finance Committee. Mm-hmm. It's something that I have to fight against. And after many months of doing that, I managed to get a new coalition from the opposition and the coalition alike around transparency, knowing that it's not an issue of left and right even. It's an issue of being decent with the public that brought us to this place. This is my mission in Knesset today.
Speaking about your mission, many of our viewers are international. Many of them know Israel from afar. And I wanted to ask you a more personal question. You're, of course, as Tal said, you started in 2011 to come into this public sphere, and you were then elected to the Knesset through the Labour Party. If you can summarize what your political life since then, what you thought then, and what you've achieved now, and also as the youngest member of Knesset, a female member of Knesset, kind of give us the inside look from there.
How much time do you have?
Not a lot.
Well, during the protest, I was, like I think the majority of my generation, didn't really like politics. I was a social activist. I thought that we have to change things from the outside because the political system is corrupt. There's nothing to do with it. The institution doesn't work. And I had an inner discussion and for a long year before I decided, after I saw that the protest movement that brought 87% of support amongst Israelis is disappearing, I realized that we have to take power into our hands and get into the place where we can really make decisions and influence.
Member of Knesset Stav Shaffir, thank you. We'll be back. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us here at I-24 News Morning Edition. We're still in a special broadcast this morning. It is day 38 of Operation Protective Edge. A midnight truce was extended for another 5 days between Israel and Hamas. This truce will be ending on Monday at midnight. And of course, we will be updating throughout this broadcast and throughout the day here at I-24 News with regards to the very, very shaky truce. As we said earlier this morning and late last night, there was a short burst of fire. Both rockets were fired into Israel, and the IDF retaliated in the Gaza Strip. On to different subjects around the world. We're going to speak about the deadly nature of Ebola, which has killed 54% of those infected in the current outbreak and up to 90% in other outbreaks. And this, of course, is prompting Western countries to take preemptive measures and is raising public concern over the issue. Yesterday, the World Health Organization classified Kenya now as a high-risk country for the spread of the deadly virus. Kenya was vulnerable because it was a major transport hub with many flights from West Africa. And this is the most serious warning to date by the WHO that Ebola could be spreading to East Africa. The number of people killed by Ebola in the western part of the continent has risen to 1,069. And with me to discuss is the head of the Center of the Geographic Medicine and Tropical Disease at Sheba Medical Center, Professor Eli Schwartz. Professor Schwartz, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So, of course, you hear these numbers and you hear these headlines, and panic is the first thing that comes to mind, as is with every deadly virus. And every few years we hear about another new deadly virus, but Ebola is not new.
It's not new. It's about 30 years. We know it, and there are several outbreaks every few years. Usually they are much more modified. You have the outbreak within a few weeks. It's ended, and that's the end of the story, and then we have to wait for another one to get it into the news.
So what changed this time? Where did it start this time, and how did it spread so quickly?
Usually, this is a disease which we call it zoonotic disease. That means the reservoir is an animal. Mm-hmm. So usually people going into the jungle, so it's usually remote areas of these countries, going into the jungle, have some kind of close contact with an animal, coming back home to the village, infected, becoming sick, and then the people around them who taking care of them become also infected. People start to die with sudden, unclear reason for this death. And after a while, usually days or weeks, people become aware that we are talking about Ebola. You have to contain the disease by taking the correct measurements. And then it's the end of the story, usually with a death toll of about a couple of hundreds of people. This time, it was different. It's again started probably from the jungle in Guinea Conakry. Mm-hmm. Somehow it went quite quickly due to better transportation to the cities around, and then you have much more people which had been affected with close contact with these victims. And the other fact is that usually it started in East Africa. This is the first time it's so far west of Africa, so nobody thought about it for much longer period of time. So that gave the chance for the disease to perpetuate and to continue to kill many more people before it started, or people started to think how to contain it. So that was the first issue. The second is usually these countries, the three countries which were affected, which actually, it's not three different countries. We're talking about very close countries in the same zone, which everything had started there, but these are countries which just went out from civilian war. The medical infrastructure is quite nothing, mm-hmm. So it's much more difficult to try to really to contain. You need for containment, you need a good central government who will roll it, good Ministry of Health, and this usually happening, this type of event happened in places
which don't have a strong government, exactly. And no strong infrastructure. The question though is there things can be done preemptively, or are we now seeing a too little too late kind of situation?
I'm not say too late, because there's never late. You have to contain it, but you have to do it now. And again, if you will take the good measurements, you will stop it. Now the best example is Nigeria. Mm-hmm. A sick person from Liberia flew to Nigeria, to Lagos, which is a mega city, right, while being sick.
Center and so forth.
And then he infected about 13 other cases. Now it caused panic. Panic in Nigeria caused panic in the world, because Lagos is really a big commercial center. Right. And I think we see now the efforts of the central government that to try to contain this government. So far, we are about approximately, I think now, almost 1 week, and there's no new cases, which is a good sign. Usually the incubation time is about 7 days. We said wait till 21 days, but usually it's within 7 days. So the fact that so far we don't have any new case in Nigeria, it's a good sign that maybe they did a good job, and we still have now to go back and to the 3 original countries and try to contain the disease.
But meanwhile, we're hearing, of course, that the World Health Organization is now labeling Kenya as a high-risk country. Kenya, as Nigeria, is a big commercial hub for the continent and very much westernized, if you will, in its infrastructure. This, of course, is prompting fears around the world.
Yeah, I think now these days that we are more aware, and every febrile patient has to be checked upon arrival. I think we can try to stop the spreading of the disease. I mean, it's not only Kenya. You have many European countries who have flights going to West Africa and back to Europe. And I don't think we have any fear that it's going to affect the Western world. Not because you may find one case once in a while, but usually after diagnosis, all measurements will be taken properly, and so I don't think they are going to be a disaster. People talking about this plague as something which is going to spread all over the world. It's not the truth. I mean, it's nice in movies. Usually they take this Ebola virus, it's a prototype of the apocalypse virus, which is going to kill the whole human beings in the world. It's not true, because you need a close contact with fluids of the sick person. It's much more difficult to really infect others. It's not like respiratory viruses, which easily you spread it in the air, and then it's very difficult to really stop it, like all kind of influenza infection. So here you have to be less aware and to be in very close contact with those patients.
Should people, Western tourists, for instance, not be going now to Africa, or is that also part of the hype of this, Ebola virus?
Maybe one sentence before. Yeah. We are talking about death toll, which also it's a change now. It's more than 1,000 compared to the previous attacks, which usually a couple of hundreds people died, and then that was the end of the disease. Just to remind, to make it into proportion, these numbers, which happened now in about 4 months, is the death toll of malaria cases per day, per 1 day. So just to make in proportion...
And that's not in the headlines.
Not in the headlines,
right.
Exactly. And people coming with malaria to the West, every week we have a case of malaria imported from Africa. So go back to your, I think, highly important question. We have a big travel medicine center, and we are asked frequently, should I cancel my trip to Africa? So again, the disease now centered in West Africa. The distance of West Africa from East Africa is about 5,000 kilometers, which is almost same from here to the North Pole. So I don't think there's any reason not to travel. And we have to think, I mean...
But are there measures that tourists should be taken coming from Israel to Africa?
No, just don't. I mean, if you are a regular traveler, don't do anything. Just don't go to hospitals to take care of the patients there.
Right.
Otherwise, if you're just a traveler, you go to safari, enjoy it, and your dangers is much less than being in Israel, sorry to say that.
And being here in Israel, are there any preemptive measures that the Israeli medical establishment is taking for people that are returning from Africa?
Yeah, so it's not Africa. We have to be more careful. People coming from these specific 3 to 4 countries with febrile illness, they have to be isolated first. They have to be checked whether it's Ebola. If it's Ebola, again, the patient should be in isolation and to be treated, and that's all. I don't see any harm to the country.
Professor Eli Schwartz, thank you for joining us this morning, and we will reiterate that there is less, perhaps, reason to worry than what's being told us in the media and so forth. Thank you for joining us. On to another subject. U.S. Defense Department officials say late last night that U.S. airstrikes and Kurdish fighters had broken the Islamic militant siege of Mount Sinjar, allowing thousands of the Yazidis there that were trapped there to escape. Special op forces who arrived on Tuesday and spent 24 hours on the northern Iraqi mountains said that, quote, the situation is much more manageable. And Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said it was, quote, far less likely now that the U.S. would be undertaking a rescue mission. For more on the Yazidi people who have now also reached the headlines suddenly under perhaps not as good circumstances as we would have wanted, with me is Idan Barir, a PhD candidate at the Department of Middle Eastern and African History at Tel Aviv University. You completed your MA thesis on the Yazidi cultural movement. Thank you for being with us. We're going to take a quick look at our report and then we'll chat.
Just one day after Haider al-Abadi was appointed Iraq's new prime minister, a suicide bomber attacked a checkpoint near his home in Baghdad. The area surrounding the attack suffered extensive damage. Though the attack claimed no casualties, this was not the only attempt to delegitimize al-Abadi since his appointment. The country's previous prime minister on Monday called the appointment unconstitutional.
The court's decision has already been made, and I doubt that it should change in a matter of days. If the court decision is not upheld, this will lead to dangerous consequences for Iraq.
Al-Abadi's appointment had inspired hope for the embattled country. The move to replace al-Maliki came as the Islamic State jihadist group continues to rampage through the country. But despite having lost U.S. support and his most prominent political allies, al-Maliki seemed unwilling today to accept the new prime minister.
I reiterate that I have no intention of leaving office and that I am still the prime minister of Iraq until the court say otherwise.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry affirmed his country's intention to support the new Iraqi prime minister.
The new Iraqi leadership has a very difficult challenge. It has to regain the confidence of its citizens by governing inclusively, but also by taking steps to demonstrate their resolve.
Following Kerry's address, the British government announced it will also assist the American-led campaign against the militants by supplying helicopters to transport military equipment to Kurdish fighters. In northern Iraq, Yezidi refugees are continuing to flee the ISIL militants to the temporary safety of Mount Sinjar. As the turmoil in the country continues to deepen, the U.S. is sending 130 more military advisors to the Kurdish region.
We are prepared to consider additional political, economic, and security options and to strengthen the democratic institutions.
But whether U.S. support will help al-Abadi, Iraq's new hope, stay in office remains to be seen.
Idan, thank you for being with us. Of course, here in Israel, we've been concentrating much on what's happening in Gaza and less on ISIS or IS now, as they would like to be called. Islamic State. But the Yazidi people and their plea has perhaps was, and let me know if I'm wrong, was a trigger point for the United States to intervene in something that maybe some will say should have intervened way back when.
Yeah, the intervention, the American intervention, is just a little bit too late, I think. They're intervening a week too late. They should have intervened, I think, as far as I can tell, about a week or 10 days ago when the entire situation broke out in Sinjar. I actually find it quite funny that the Americans claim this success to be their own. Kurdish fighters from Syria and Turkey has been clearing a humanitarian corridor between Rojava, the Syrian or the Kurdish autonomous region in northern Syria. That has been a joint effort for the last couple of days. I think it goes back a week back. And American soldiers landed in Sinjar, on Jabal Sinjar, just 2 days ago for the first time, after 3 or 4 days of modest efforts to throw, not, just throw from planes, right, some humanitarian aid that just exploded on the ground and was completely lost. So the American claim of this success to be their own. Rojava fighters has been moving out Yezidi refugees from Sinjar to Rojava and then to the Kurdish autonomous region in northern Iraq in the last couple of days. They already rescued around 20,000 people. So the American success is nice and helpful, but it's only a success of the last couple of days.
Who are the Yezidi people for people here in Israel and also many in the West? As we said, maybe only when these pictures came out of them on the mountain, it kind of triggered this kind of sympathetic, if you can call it a sympathetic move by the U.S. administration, as you said, to throw the humanitarian aid. Who are they and who is actually taking responsibility for their future?
Well, it took tragedy to get to know these people. So let's start from the beginning. We're talking about roughly, and numbers are quite tricky in this region, so there are no hard numbers and data, but we're talking about roughly 500,000 to 1 million people all over the world, with a religious center in Iraq, around Mosul. The tomb of their prophet, it's not a prophet, but the reformer of the Yezidi religion is located just 30 miles northeast of Mosul. That's where the center of the community is, in Sheikhan. There's another enclave in Sinjar, west of Mosul. And historically, there has been at least half of the community in Turkey until the 1960s, where Turkey just drove them out to Germany. The Yezidi religion is usually depicted as a sect, something that's not a real religion, but it's a religion on its own right, I think. It's based on Zoroastrian religion, the old Persian religion, and it's a sort of a syncretistic religion, taking influences and incorporating, prayers and religious religious rites from...
We have to break. I apologize. We're going to of course, be covering this closely throughout. Thank you, Idan, for joining us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to I-24 News Morning Edition. We're still in our special broadcast mode this morning. It is day 38 of Operation Protective Edge. We're going to go straight now to our I-24 News correspondent, Yoav Borovich. You're on the Israeli-Gaza border this morning, just a few hours after another ceasefire was signed for another 5 days. Yoav?
Good morning, Yael. Yes, we're here in the Gaza border. As you said, still quiet. We know that last night, around 12 o'clock, 5 rockets landed in this area, in this open area here in the Gaza envelope. We can see there's the IDF Armored Corps here behind me. A lot of soldiers around. They're getting closer. The troops are getting closer to the border. We know that at any given moment, this 5-day ceasefire can end abruptly. As we know also, the Israeli Air Force last night operated in the Gaza Strip, hitting 4 terror targets. We also know this morning about the IDF's decision to open investigations about some cases of fighting in the Gaza Strip, including the Hadar Gold and Khan Yunis fighting, when there are claims of heavy artillery after the Israeli officer was kidnapped and murdered. We know that Israel and the IDF are very weary of the Judge Chavis UN Commission inquiry that's supposed to start soon. So Israel and the IDF also want to investigate themselves. But the people here don't care so much about that. They care about their safety. Most of the people here in the Gaza envelope are still not back. They are going to hold their big demonstration tonight in Tel Aviv. The rallying cry of the demonstration will be that the Gaza envelope needs to get exactly the same treatment like Tel Aviv. We also know yesterday Brigadier General Miki Edelstein, the chief of the Gaza unit, talked to people in the Moshav Netiv HaAsara, and he had some harsh words towards Benny Gantz, his big commander, who talked a week ago about the need to come back. But we know what happened during the weekend. More than 100 rockets fell exactly here in this area. So although we still have the ceasefire, the 3rd ceasefire now, still not exactly quiet. If we're talking about last night, we'll be here following all developments during the day.
Yoav Borovich, thank you for that update. And of course, you will be updating us here at I-24 News, as you said, throughout the day. With us also in studio is I-24 News correspondent Gabi Tartakovsky. Good morning, Gabi.
Good morning.
And Roni Stav, Ynett's cultural correspondent in the United States. Thank you for being here. Gabi, we'll start with you. Some headlines.
Yes, we're starting with Haaretz, which reports a very interesting case. U.S. judge disqualifies himself from trying a Palestinian woman as the family was discovered to be related to her terror attack. U.S. federal judge in Detroit, Paul Burman, disqualified himself from trying 67-year-old Rasmia Ouda. Rasmia Ouda was convicted on charges of 2 terror attacks in Israel in 1969. One of the most deadliest attacks was in a supermarket chain in 1969, and the judge confessed that his family back in the day had some stocks involved in this cooperation, and said that he was not willing to be appearing as someone who is biased towards the case because of that. Uda has been released from Israeli prisons after serving a 10-year term. She moved to the United States in 1995 from Jordan, and this whole affair comes from the accusations that legal authorities claim that she lied on her immigration papers, saying she did not mention at all that she is a convicted terrorist, that she did time, and so forth. And this incident is really going to see some headlines because Uda's lawyers have been constantly saying that the judge should disqualify himself because he is somewhat allegedly connected to Jewish organizations in Detroit. So they're obviously pleased, but I don't think there's going to be a bright future for Uda because she did hide some very important facts in her life story.
And moving to the United States without disclosing those facts is not the smartest thing to do.
No, it's not.
It's
better. Honesty is the best policy, even if you're a convicted terrorist.
What else do you have?
The Belfast Telegraph reports about an interesting scenario. A plaque marking the birthplace of Chaim Herzog, former Israeli president, was removed due to anti-Israel attacks.
I didn't get that part.
No, the plaque was actually put in place since 1998.
Okay.
Chaim Herzog was one of the seminal figures in Israel's history. He later became the Israeli president for a decade, retired in 1993. Belfast officials said that they removed the plaque after they've seen some very anti-Semitic incidents around that area, that a group of teenagers tried to remove it themselves, and there was another incident in Belfast in which someone threw stones at a synagogue. So this is a precautionary measure, but it's still a very alarming one because...
And a symbolic one as well.
And a symbolic one. They fear for the safety of the residents who live nearby, but this is still a very sad turn of events.
Indeed. And of course, the next generations of Herzogs are now in parliament as well. We have the head of the opposition, of course, is Yitzhak Bougie Herzog. What else do you have?
Moving on, The Guardian reports about the winner of the Fields Medal Mathematics Prize. History is being made. A woman born and raised in Iran. Maria Mirzaki, she's now in Stanford. She graduated from Harvard. More power to her. She won 15 Canadian dollars. This doesn't sound much,
How
but
much?
15,000 Canadian dollars.
Yeah.
This doesn't sound much, but this is the most prestigious prize that a mathematician in the world can achieve. It's been likened to be like the Nobel Prize. It's been awarded every 4 years. The interesting thing is that people are trying to see this as a symbolic moment that will encourage more women to be involved in science and math.
And of course, her coming from Iran is
and her coming from Iran, it's a trailblazing story. Any way you look at it. A professor at Oxford said that there is a rise in recent years. About 40% of UK mathematicians, undergrads, are female, but we see it in every spectrum, basically. As the degree is being more prestigious, as the studies advance, you see less and less female students. Hopefully this will probably influence and push more women to achieve such a status.
Absolutely.
And she wasn't into science to begin with. She was more into literature, and her dream was to be a writer.
Wow.
So
there's hope.
There's hope. There's hope.
If I ever want to change professions, I can just maybe be a mathematician. Yeah, right.
Looks easy.
Looks, super easy. What else do you have?
The Independent reports about a very unfortunate incident regarding the media. We have seen some very tragic news in the last couple of days. We see the tragic death of Robin Williams. Channel 4 News in Britain is apologizing for airing Williams' clip from Good Morning Vietnam, in which he shouted, "Why don't they get a rope and hang me?"
Yeah.
Obviously, Channel 4, you've done it again. Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam, one of his most memorable roles as a loudmouth disc jockey. So They aired it during a tribute piece to the late Robin Williams. Later, Channel 4 apologized, saying that it was an inappropriate line and there was no offense intended, but there was a very notable outrage. People said, you know, the movie is 2 hours long. I mean, you can cut any other part of it. There's some pretty memorable lines other than that, but still they
that video
carelessly
editor is probably, you know,
chose it, yes.
Yeah, sitting in a closet and laughing, giggling to himself.
Yes, maybe he would have liked it. Maybe,
yeah, I think so.
Maybe. A dark sense of humor is always needed.
Yes, indeed. What else do you have?
Moving on, the Telegraph reports that a mystery has been solved. You as a New Yorker might have seen it before. The Brooklyn Bridge was being held white flags over the Brooklyn Bridge, and this mystery is now solved. 2 German artists claim responsibility for it. They took over the Brooklyn Bridge on July 22 to commemorate the 140th anniversary of a German-born Brooklyn Bridge architect, John August Bolling.
It's only if it's only for that, then I can live with it. I thought
yes, there's no political message behind it. This was not a terror attack.
No. Okay.
And obviously, I mean, if World War III were to open with a white flag, I mean, could be nice for a change. So they stated on Tuesday that they were very careful to treat the bridge and the flags with respect. They folded the U.S. Flag in accordance to all proper procedure, with the flag code being honored like any other military operation.
Okay.
The New York Police Department is not so pleased about this moving tribute, and saying they were aware of the claims, but they do not confirm whether they are responsible or not. Initially, they thought this was a 5 or 6 man operations. They did not clarify their motives, and the mayor of New York said this is a very severe security breach and a wake-up call.
But at the end, it is only just a white flag.
It's just a white flag commemorating an architect. I mean, it's a nice gesture.
Yeah.
I wouldn't risk my life climbing over the Brooklyn Bridge at night to commemorate the life of an architecture, but that's just me.
That's just you. That's a good decision, though. Gabi, thank you for being with us. Stay with us. We're going to have some headlines from the culture world here with Roni Stav. Roni, what are you starting with?
Well, we have some, I think, optimistic news. I think entertainment news is a good
it's
idea of news these days. So the first thing is a name that we all should start in memorizing.
Okay,
this name is Emma Ferrer.
Okay.
She's the granddaughter of Audrey Hepburn.
Oh, lucky her.
Yeah. She was off the spotlight till now, but this 20-year-old beautiful lady is now being featured in 2 versions of Harper's Bazaar's latest cover. She's wearing a L'Envant 2015 Fresh Resort collection that really calls to mind her iconic relatives' timeless style.
You know, you can definitely see the similarities.
You really see the resemblance between the two, and that's not the only nostalgic connection that was made in this project. It was shot by Michael Avedon, who's the grandson of the legendary photographer Richard Avedon, that Hepburn was a longtime muse.
Wow.
So there was a whole
closing
connection from the
circle.
past. Yeah, she's talking about her connection to her late grandmother, which she never got a chance to meet. Hepburn died 1 year before Emma was born, and she's talking about Hepburn the star and Hepburn the grandmother and the difference in between. Yeah. She's saying that she can live her presence through her father. Her father is Hepburn's oldest son, Sean, from her marriage to actor and director Mel Ferrer. Mm-hmm. And she did admit that she didn't watch all the movies, but that when she watched Breakfast at Tiffany's, she said, I enjoyed it the same way any young girl would. So that's a good name.
And then she can say, and that's my grandmother.
And that's my grandmother
no one
right
else can
there.
Say that,
and
right.
you know, I love the whole idea that now royalty families is Hepburn instead of Kardashians.
Yeah.
Like, as long as this is the line.
You're very,
exactly. It's working
You're very
for me.
optimistic.
It's really working for me.
You're very, very optimistic.
Yes.
What else do you have?
We have some more good news. Good news for Star Wars fans. Harrison Ford is back on his feet. Literally back on his feet.
We were worried there.
Yeah, for the production of the new film that will resume later this month. He broke his foot while filming episode 7 back in June, and he was seen getting around with the help of special hands-free crutches. Now, the thing is that while Disney said that the production would only delayed by 2 weeks, some rumors claimed that the production would delayed longer by as much as 6 months. So everyone was pretty panicked about that little detail.
He's getting older.
But you know, like he's doing his job. Like he's good.
Yeah.
He was spotted without the crutches already, wearing just a bandage around his ankle. And his co-star Sylvester Stallone, that also wrote episode 7 of Star Wars, teased him with saying "break a leg," according to Variety. So Sylvester Stallone, who knew when you had sense of humor.
When Stallone said something, "break a leg," I just run the other way.
I'm like, are you gonna break my other leg? Is that some sort of a tease of what's gonna happen next? No one knows.
Yeah. Too much for me. For that would scare me.
I agree.
Another person that scares me is Justin Bieber.
Well, you know, but Justin Bieber
for the same reasons, by the way.
Well, he is going to anger management course.
Still scary.
How exciting is that? That's like the only news about Bieber that I was ever excited to hear.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like that's also a PR ploy. He just wants to get back on the headlines.
Well, maybe. You know, there's a whole line of arrests that happened lately with Bieber and a bunch of trials that happened. This one is from January 23rd when he arrested for a drug race. He was driving a rented Lamborghini and he raced against a Ferrari driven by the R&B singer Khalil Amir Sharif.
Okay.
Now, the thing is that the alcohol breath tests found Bieber's level low. But later on a urine test, they showed that there was the presence of marijuana and the shocking. Woohoo! And the anti-anxiety drug Xanax. So no more anxiety, Justin Bieber. Yeah. He was able to get down in the charges from driving under the influence. Right now, he pleaded guilty to misdemeanor careless driving and resisting arrest without that violent charges that was seen before. And he agreed to go to an anger management course.
Well, you know what? Maybe it is a different thing, a different Justin Bieber. He'll probably be putting out an album maybe soon with Leonard
But you know,
Cohen.
I like the whole anger management thing. It used to be rehab, and now there's a whole anger management.
Right.
I think he should go Amy Winehouse and
but not
do a
like
song
Amy
about
Winehouse.
anger management
Right.
course instead of rehab. I like that.
We'll be back tomorrow.